In the Feast of Ingathering, an 8-day feast with special sacrifices each day, the first day would have been 30 extra animals, the second day 29 extra animals, the third 28 extra. You just see it keeps on going and going and going. This took a lot of work for them to do, but it was commanded by God. Question 2 on lesson 4. How is the Sabbath connected to other parts of the Pentateuch, and what was the Sabbath to teach them? And his answers he put was God rested from all his work on the seventh day of creation. And of course, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Was it some kind of punishment, the Sabbath? Was that punishing them? Ms. Rhonda?
I think it was for worship.
Mm-hmm.
To worship God and to remember what all he had done.
Yep. And some of Bob's material here. The Sabbath day was the most frequent time to be observed because it came once a week. It was given to Israel as a blessing. So it was a blessing, was that time of rest, as Ms. Rhonda said, worship, to remember all the things that God had done for them. And also, it was one of the 10 Commandments, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Exodus 20 and verse 8. Anybody else? I didn't press the button enough. It was a reminder that they were slaves with no rest, but the Lord was bringing you into a land of rest. Number 3, when was the Feast of New Moons, and what was to be done on this day?
The beginning of each month.
Yep, first day of each month. And this feast is usually talked about alongside the Sabbath and refers to another day of remembrance and rest. What were the 3 feasts that the men were required to celebrate? And keying on there, the men, it was just the men were required to. Do we know those? Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Another note here is notice that the women and children were not required to present themselves for these yearly feasts. They were welcome and did attend on most occasions because it was a time of feasting and rejoicing for the whole family. But they were not required to do so because there were times when a woman was not physically able to make the journey, or she would be unclean due to the birth of a baby or some related reason. So those are only required of the men. So you might want to read Deuteronomy 16:16. Can't remember if it mentions anything in there.
Three times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God in the place which he chooses. At the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed.
I don't know that I ever caught that in the past, with it just being the men that were just required to celebrate those. Anything else on question 4? When was the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and how long did it last? Someone want to turn to Leviticus 23 and read 6 through 8? Leviticus 23, 6 through 8. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Lord. 7 days you must not eat unleavened bread. You must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, but you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord for 7 days. The 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. And it was immediately after the Passover. 7 days or 8 total. And in Bob's material here, the Passover feast was immediately followed by a week of eating unleavened bread called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The names are used interchangeably to refer to the 8-day celebration, sometimes called Passover, referring to the whole period, and sometimes called the Feast of Unleavened Bread, referring to the whole time. Technically, the Passover was a 1-day feast, immediately followed by the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which was a 7-day feast. Passover began at twilight on the 14th day of the first month, and then on the 15th day of the month, the Feast of Unleavened Bread began and lasted through the 21st day. Now, I don't think people's mind, this would have been difficult to keep up with some of this stuff, wouldn't it? People's minds don't change throughout time, you think, but I know just looking at it here, it would have been, what would it have taken? Taken dedication, wouldn't it? You would have had to want to do this, and people don't change either. There were some whose hearts were not in this, wasn't there? Just like today. All right, question number 6. When was the Feast of Weeks to be observed, and what is the New Testament name of this feast?
It would have been 50 days after Passover and it's called Pentecost.
Yep. 50 days after Sabbath, they fell on the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Acts 2 and verse 1 calls it the day of Pentecost, and we all know about Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. That's when the church was established on that day, Acts chapter 2. In the Old Testament, the feast is called the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Harvest, and the Day of First Fruits. It's called the Feast of 50 Days in the writings of Josephus. It is from that name, 50 days, that the term Pentecost comes. We see that in Acts 2 and verse 1. The word Pentecost was a Greek term and is never used in the Old Testament. Still, other names were used in non-biblical Jewish writings as well. Any comments, questions on anything in Lesson 4?
It's interesting, and it's no coincidence that the church was established on that day. It's a feast of first fruits.
Yep. And we'll get to it soon. We'll mention this again in a few minutes. Where is all of this pointing to? Yep, you can tie Jesus into pretty much every single one of these things that we're looking at here. All right, lesson 5. What feast days took place during the 7th month?
Sabbath, Feast of Trumpet, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Feast of First Fruits, Feast of Weeks.
That's right. I'll just read a little portion here. You said all those. The 7th month completed the cycle of feasts, which began with the Passover. This month was the time for the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles, or Ingatherings. The year which began with the Abib did not end with this Feast of Tabernacles, but it was the last great feast in the year. Abib was equivalent to our March 15th through April 15th, and the Feast of Tabernacles was in October. All right, what does atonement mean? And what took place on the Day of Atonement? So what's the definition of atonement? I think there's several.
Reparation for a wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yep, to cover, pacify, propitiate, to appease. And we look at atonement, just that definition. And we'll go through in a second all that happened on the Day of Atonement. Is that showing up there? All right, so you look at all those things. We won't take the time to read the whole scripture of it, but it's in Leviticus 16, 4 through 28. Okay. The high priest prepares, he washes and dresses in simple linen garments. Sin offering for the priest, sacrifices a bull for his own sins and his household. Cleansing the most holy, takes burning coals and incense inside the veil, fills the most holy place with smoke, sprinkles the bull's blood on before the mercy seat. And you take a look at all those things. The 2 goats chosen from the people. Of course, by lot, 1 goat for the Lord, 1 for, I had to write down how to pronounce it again, Uzazel. Doesn't look like it would be pronounced like that. If I'm saying that right, if I looked it up right, the scapegoat. And we'll get into that in just a second. Sin offering for the people, scapegoat ritual, cleansing the priest and the people, the disposal of the remains. But even you look at the term, you look at the definition of atonement. Did any of this forgive sins? What does Hebrews tell us? It did one thing. It was commanded by God. It kept them in the right relationship with God, didn't it? What is Hebrews 10, 1 through 4? Can somebody turn there? Hebrews 10, 1 through 4.
Since the law is but a shadow of the good things coming, instead of the true form of these realities, it can never, by the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year, make perfect those who draw near. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered, since the worshippers, having once been cleansed, will no longer have any consciousness of sin? But in these sacrifices there is a reminder of sins every year. For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins.
So it atoned for their sins. It kept them in that right relationship with God, didn't it? But of course, we know what was the only sacrifice that took away sin? Jesus. That's right. He was that perfect lamb, that perfect sacrifice. All right, when was I don't think this question is on your material, but we'll go over it anyway. When was the Feast of Tabernacles? How long did it last? And what was its purpose? Y'all wouldn't know it since it wouldn't be on there. They couldn't prepare for it. Observed at the end of the year after the harvest. Lasted 7 days. Time of thanksgiving to the Lord. And a time of remembrance when they came out of Egypt. A lot of these are tied to that too, isn't it? Thanksgiving, rescuing them, getting them out of Egypt, remembering what God had done for them. All right, on the paper it's a little different than this. In a few words, describe what was to take... Oh, we missed one. Find as many references to the Day of Atonement in the book of Hebrews. I wrote down several. Did y'all have any?
Chapter 9, verses 11 through 14.
Yep.
Chapter 9, verses 24 through 26.
Mm-hmm. And it has little tidbits and a lot more than that too. It's covered in them. Hebrews 9:7, Hebrews 7:27, Hebrews 10:11 through 14. So Hebrews has a lot of references there. All right, what was to take place in the Sabbath year? Once they entered Canaan and enjoyed the yield of the land for 6 years, they're to observe a Sabbath for the land in the 7th year.
And let the land rest.
Yep.
Yeah, let the slaves go, they cancel debts.
Mm-hmm.
Property was restored, the crops, I think I read, the crops that did grow, I thought it's, anybody could go, free to anybody to go get them.
I think they couldn't store anything up from that. Like you said, anybody could go and get it if I read that correctly. It wasn't something you gather and save and store up for income for coming times or months or anything.
They're supposed to read the law too.
Yes, I had that one. I read the law aloud to the whole assembly. That'd have been a long sitting, wouldn't it? Stay there during that whole reading. But again, and I'm sure there were some people. We got to go through this again, just like today. I've got to come Sunday night too. I need to come Wednesday. Depends on what kind of heart we have, and I'm sure, just like today, there's people then whose hearts were not in it. All right, how often did the year of Jubilee take place? How was it observed? Where do we see it fulfilled in the New Testament?
The year after the seventh Sabbath year, seventh Sabbath. Yep. Would be like the 50th year.
So the 50th year would have been the year of Jubilee. It was a year in which all were released from work, debt, and slavery.
So if I got that right, they got 2 years where they're not planting crops.
I think so.
Year of Jubilee, that would be the year after the seventh Sabbath year, so they were planting crops.
Yep. I think I missed a question. Did y'all see the scapegoat slide go across up top?
Yeah, back in. Well, you made mention in the slide with several.
I guess he blocked that one and wasn't planning on. But the scapegoat, what was its purpose? What did the scapegoat?
Did they confess the sins on it, then cut it loose in the wilderness? Is that how it went?
They placed their hands on it.
Yeah.
One, of course, was sacrifice. The other one was the scapegoat.
Yeah.
Uzazel is how you say it, I guess, was released into the wilderness, kind of taking the sin outside of the camp, or outside away from the people. Thoughts, comments, questions? All right, what does the word vow mean in the context of Leviticus 27. I got a little portion here from Bob's book to read. The word vow means a solemn promise. When we think of vowing, we think of promises we make to one another and of our obligation to keep our promises. But that kind of vowing or promising is not what is emphasized in the law of Moses. The vow discussed in the law were voluntary sacrifices to God. The vows might involve property, whether people, lands, houses, animals, or actions, and were essentially free will offerings. In order to invoke the Lord's favor, or perhaps to express gratitude for the Lord's blessing, the worshiper promised to give something of value to the Lord. Can y'all think of an example in the Old Testament? It can be in the future from this or whenever, when somebody made a vow to God. I'm sorry. Okay.
Samuel?
That's the one I had down. I had Hannah vowed for Samuel, or vowed to devote Samuel. Yes. Sorry. You turn to 1 Samuel 1:11. Somebody read that for me. I think that's right. 1 Samuel 1:11.
And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the afflictions of your servant, and remember me, and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head.
All right, what about a New Testament example? Can anybody think of one where a vow was made? About Paul in Acts 18:18. Remember when he shaved his head because he'd taken a vow? We don't know what that vow was, but the result of that was him shaving his head. It could have been, it's just speculation. It could have been safety for his journey, or we don't know what it was, but you're right, he did shave his head because he had taken a vow in Acts 18:18. And of course, even though it was voluntary, it was a sin to then break that vow. What kinds of vows might one make? All right, Bob's material here is in Leviticus 27, 1 through 25. Vows could take many different forms. One might vow to give property, a person, or even oneself to the Lord. The vow could be satisfied in either of two ways: by actually giving the property or person into the service of the Lord, by paying a prescribed sum of money representing the value of the object named. The value was given to the Lord by donating it to the treasury of the sanctuary. And there was a vowing of persons. Leviticus 27, 1 through 8. The assessed value of a person was based upon the age and gender. That is, it was based upon the value of what that person's work would be. The one making the vow paid the assigned price in order to fulfill his vow. The law was specific about the price to pay. The story of Samuel shows another way of fulfilling a vow concerning a person. Hannah literally gave her son into a lifetime of service to Jehovah with a Nazirite vow. It's also the vowing of animals. If the animal vowed was one that could be sacrificed to God, it was holy and could not be redeemed or exchanged. The vowing of houses or land. If a man vowed a house, the priest assessed it, and that value must be accepted. The house could remain a permanent part of the inheritance of the priests and Levites. Or the person could add 20% to the assigned value of the house, pay the total amount into the treasury, and he continued to own the house. If a man vowed a field, the priest assessed its value based upon the number of crops that could be raised on it before the year of Jubilee. He could give the land to the Levites as part of their permanent inheritance, or he could redeem it as his own by adding 20% to the assessed value and paying the money into the treasury. If he did not redeem it before the Jubilee, the land automatically became the property of the Levites. Well, there were also some things that could not be vowed. That's Leviticus 27, 26 through 34. I'm going to turn there. Leviticus 26, 27, 26 through 34. But the firstborn of the animals, which should be the Lord's firstborn, no man shall dedicate, whether it is an ox or a sheep, it is the Lord's. And if it is an unclean animal, then he shall redeem it according to your valuation, and shall add 1/5 to it. Or if it is not redeemed, then it shall be sold according to your valuation. Nevertheless, no devoted offering that a man may devote to the Lord of all that he has, both man and beast, or the field of his possession, shall be sold or redeemed. Every devoted offering is most holy to the Lord. No person under the ban who may become doomed to destruction among men shall be redeemed, but shall surely be put to death. And all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. If a man wants at all to redeem any of his tithes, he shall add 1/5 to it. And concerning the tithe of the herd or the flock, of whatever passes under the rod, the 10th one shall be holy to the Lord. He shall not inquire whether it is good or bad, nor shall he exchange it. But if he exchanges it at all, then both it and the one exchanged for it shall be holy, and shall not be redeemed. These are the commandments which the Lord commanded Moses for the children of Israel on Mount Sinai. So basically, you could not do what? You couldn't vow something that already what? That belonged to God. It was his already. Couldn't make a vow on something that was already to be dedicated and belonged to God. Firstborn of the animals, devoted things, tithing. All right, what were the requirements of the Nazirite vow? It's a little bit of a lengthy one. Does somebody want to turn there and read that one? If not, I'll read it. Number 6, 1 through 21. Before we read that, I'll read an excerpt from Brother Walden's book. The Nazirite vow is the best known of the vows of the Old Testament. It was a vow of a special dedication of one's own self to God. Usually the vow was for a limited time, but there are 3 cases in the Bible of men who were Nazirites all their lives. Can anybody know those or remember them? Samson, Samuel, John the Baptist. Yep. The rules for a Nazirite vow were specific: how to begin the vow, how to live during the period of the vow, and what to do at the end of the vow. Does anybody want to read that? If not, I'll read it. Number 6, 1 through 21. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When either a man or a woman consecrates an offering to take a vow of a Nazirite to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from the wine and similar drink. He shall drink neither vinegar made from wine nor vinegar made from similar drink. Neither shall he drink any grape juice nor eat fresh grapes or raisins. I mean, we're going into pretty specific stuff. You can't deny what it. Couldn't make up your own things here. It's very specific. All the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, from seed to skin. All the days of the vow of his separation no razor shall come upon his head, until the days are fulfilled for which he separated himself to the Lord. He shall be holy. Then he shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow. All the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body. He shall not make himself unclean even for his father or his mother, for his brother or his sister, when they die, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation he shall be holy to the Lord. And if anyone dies very suddenly beside him, and he defiles his consecrated head, then he shall shave his head on the day of his cleansing. On the 7th day he shall shave it. Then on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest, to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And the priest shall offer one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, and make atonement for him, because he sinned in regard to the corpse. And he shall sanctify his head that same day. He shall consecrate to the Lord the days of his separation, and bring a male lamb in its first year as a trespass offering. But the former days shall be lost, because his separation was defiled. Now this is the law of the Nazirite. When the days of his separation are fulfilled, he shall be brought to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. He shall present his offering to the Lord, 1 male lamb in its first year without blemish as a burnt offering, 1 ewe lamb in its first year without blemish as a sin offering, 1 ram without blemish as a peace offering, a basket of unleavened bread, cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, unleavened wafers, anointed with oil, and grain offering with their drink offerings. And the priest shall bring them before the Lord, and offer his sin offering and his burnt offering. He shall offer the ram as a sacrifice of the peace offering to the Lord. With the basket of unleavened bread, the priest shall also offer its grain offering and its drink offering. Then the Nazirite shall shave his consecrated head at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. He shall take the hair from his consecrated head and put it on the fire, which is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. And the priest shall take the bull shoulder of the ram, 1 unleavened cake from the basket, and 1 unleavened wafer, and put them upon the hands of the Nazirite after he has shaved his consecrated hair. And the priest shall wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. They are holy for the priest, together with the breast of a wave offering and the thigh of a heave offering. After that, the Nazirite may drink wine. This is the law of the Nazirite who vows to the Lord the offering for his separation, and besides that, whatever else his hand is able to provide, according to the vow which he takes, he must do according to the law of his separation. So again, it doesn't mention any specific times. I think it was all up to that individual, what they had vowed at the beginning. That individual and God knew. So, but again, we only have mention of 3 there. I guess that doesn't mean there could have been more, but that seems like a lot of stuff to do, doesn't it? I wonder if many people couldn't follow through with all of it. I don't know. But we only do have mention of 3 in the Bible that were Nazirites all their lives. And it could have been more that did it for shorter time frames.
Who's those 3 again, brother?
Samson, Samuel, and John the Baptist. Yep. Mhm. All right, how do things... Hold on one second. Sorry, I get behind on this. How do things discussed in Leviticus 27 point forward to Christ in the New Testament? There's a few that Gable had down. We'll turn to some of these too. Somebody turn to Romans 12 and read 1 through 2. We devote our lives to God as living sacrifices. Romans 12, 1 through 2.
Romans 12, 1 through 2.
Yep, 1 and 2. Mhm.
Okay. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God.
Yep. And what is our body? Living sacrifice. Hebrews 10:7. Christ offered himself willingly. Do not think that one's right. No, that's not the right one there. We have been bought with a price. We're not our own. 1 Corinthians 6, 19 through 20. Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own? For you were bought at a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. Then all good things come from God. Give back to him. It's James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. Also 1 Peter 4 and verse 10. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Again, we mentioned it earlier, and pretty much in every one of these feasts, everything we read in this study, again, where does it point to?
Jesus.
Points to Jesus, that ultimate sacrifice, the only sacrifice, perfect sacrifice that could forgive sins. We've got about 4 minutes. I'm going to stop there. Gable might be upset that I went through 3 of his questions, but I might tell him to go back and do 6 again since we breezed through them so fast. Anybody have anything else? Comments, questions?
There's a lot of having to think about God. You may just sit there and just sort of have glassy-eyed look over your face from all that stuff that's going on. There's a lot of stuff about having God on your mind, and how it applies to us today is, I think, it's living sacrifice. It's very serious to take a vow. I guess what I'm trying to get to is that if we got our mind on God enough, things of the world not going to creep in. We got God.
Yep, and back they would have had to have done that back then too. Yeah, they would have, like you said, it had to have been a constant reminder,
I think
just
that's
like
the
today.
lesson for us today is
Yeah.
that, again, we need to be. It's so easy for us to be like the world and just we come here twice on Sunday and on Wednesday night, and then we go out into the world and maybe we don't think about it as much as we should, perhaps. Maybe.
And I'm sure there were distractions back then too, but look at all the stuff we have today that distracts us. They didn't have as many sporting events, they didn't have technology. Still, I'm sure things got in their minds, but look at all the stuff that we have to protect our minds against to stay focused too. Anything else? All right.